Welcome to the Sober Sex Sofa, where I discuss the often challenging topics of sobriety, sex, and mental health. It still perplexes me to this day how I went from supermodel to super slut. So, my name is Shanti Owen, and I work in the addiction recovery field. I have been doing so since 2016. The topic of this particular video is who is a sex addict and who is not. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Because I am a sex addict. To help relieve some of you who are very concerned that they might be a sex addict, I'm going to tell you what a sex addict is not. So, a sex addict is not someone who has a high libido, who enjoys sex maybe 2 to 4 times a week, someone who maybe watches pornography a few times a month. These are not sex addicts. Here's what a sex addict is, and I speak from experience because I am a sex addict. Let me give you first a clinical definition of what is sex addiction. Sexual addiction is an intense focus on sexual fantasies, urges, and sexual activities that cannot be controlled. They cause distress, harm to our health, our relationships, and our careers, and many aspects of our lives. The word control is a very important component on deciding or waking up to the fact that you might be a sex addict. And by the way, this applies to all addictions. I'm also an alcoholic. I'm a debtor and a gambler. I'm also a love addict. And the control is key to finding out if you have any type of addiction. In other words, if you can control your behavior, and if your behavior is not disrupting your health, your relationships, your career, you're probably not a sex addict. I want to tell you all that I was quite a well-known model back in the 80s, and it still perplexes me to this day how I went from supermodel to super slut. I remember back in the 80s when I was starting to act out quite intensely, I couldn't understand how come all of my peers, my coworkers, my fellow model friends, they owned apartments in Manhattan, in Paris, in California, and I was barely scraping by in a rental apartment. My modeling agent would say, "Hey, there's a client that wants to book you tomorrow morning. Are you available?" First thing that went through my mind was, wait a minute. Am I available? Oh no, there's a huge party tomorrow. There's this really hot guy I want to meet. So I would say no. And I would make up some story about why I wasn't available. Now, you could say that it didn't affect my career because I was quite successful. I worked with the best of the best. I was all over magazines. I had campaigns. Not enough cash, but definitely I was very visible. My life didn't seem too unmanageable. It wasn't affecting me in such a way that it was at least what I thought was hurting my career. My sex addiction showed up mostly as cheating on my wonderful boyfriends. I would usually fess up. It's painful to find out that someone you think you're in a monogamous relationship is cheating on you. I lost this wonderful, wonderful man, the love of my life at that period because of my infidelities. But then in my 30s, I married and I left modeling. I moved to the country, had a child, and what seemed like my problem, my cheating problem, seemed to be over. I had promised myself that I would never cheat on a man again. And I never have. I was pretty much the quote unquote good girl, but I was also miserable. And I stayed in that marriage for 9 years. And then I moved back to New York City. And this is when my sexual acting out really hit the roof. I did have a couple of monogamous relationships during that decade, but in between the monogamous relationships, my promiscuity hit a height that I didn't think it was even possible. I mean, I was spinning 30 lovers at any given time. I used to keep lists. I had an A list, a B list, and a C list, and I color coded them. Oh gosh. So I would, because I couldn't remember them all. And I used to color code them. If they were close to New York City, they got a red. If they were near New York City, they got a pink. If they were far from New York City, they were like blue or green or something like that. And I categorized them also by who would easily come to me at a given notice. I had lots of booty calls in my neighborhood, like less than 10 blocks away. Just reliving this is exhausting. I don't know how I did it, but anyway, that's what I did. Because when my love addict was sick, because I couldn't live alone, I couldn't be alone, which was another reason why I cheated on my boyfriends when I traveled. I could never be alone with myself. When my love addict was sick, what I did was I medicated myself with sex. I figured, well, you're not going to fall in love instantly, but the more people you have sex with, the more opportunity you have to find somebody. And that's what I did. I guess if you want to take a look at this as drivers in a car, my love addict was at the steering wheel. My sex addict was driving passenger, shotgun. And when my love addict was so sick, she was dangerously driving the car, the sex addict would pull her over, throw her in the back seat and say, I'm driving this wagon. And man, was that a treacherous ride. And then I met a man who was really into polyamorous relationships, BDSM. I thought that was a little intriguing to me. But I did tell him that I wasn't interested in a polyamorous relationship because I had had one and it was very destructive for me. Because when I got jealous that my boyfriend was with somebody else, how I would get back at him was I would sleep with about a dozen people that weekend. I was asking my boyfriend at the time if we could slow down this promiscuous train. And he didn't think he was we were being promiscuous at all. But I was getting more and more angry. I was feeling more and more out of control. And then when 2008 hit, I had just quit my job a few months earlier at a law firm. And he had lost his job almost a year earlier. So we were both unemployed. And I came up with this brilliant idea to get into prostitution because we needed money fast and neither of us was pulling in money. And I asked my boyfriend how he felt about it. And he was like, well, honey, if that's what you want to do. And I'm thinking, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to get jobs, but there are no jobs. Now, here's the difference between someone with a sex addiction and someone who doesn't have a sex addiction. If I did not have a sex addiction, I would never have entertained this. Not only did I entertain it, but I executed it. And I became a prostitute for about 2 years, I would say. Prostitution became my new heroin. I discovered sex and money, and I did not want anything else. I didn't even want sex with my boyfriend anymore. We ultimately got married, so I didn't want sex with my husband either. Same guy, different label. It was because I also have lots of addiction issues around money. I'm a gambler, I'm a debtor. It was the perfect storm. And I have had people ask me many times over the year, didn't you think it was just too shameful and horrible to, become a prostitute? And my answer, the first time somebody asked me, my answer was, and it still is, I gave an example of what it's like if somebody offered you to sit at a banquet of all of your favorite foods, and then they tell you, I'm going to pay you $5,000 to eat it. Well, wouldn't you want to do it? Well, that's how I was. Sex was my addiction, and I got paid for it. It was so hard to get sober from my sex addiction. How sex addiction can manifest is different. It's very unique for each person. Just as a drug addiction, each person has their favorite drug. They sometimes mix and mingle them. Each sex addict has their own preferred way of acting out. Mine was cheating on boyfriends. And then it grew into intense promiscuity, group sex, and prostitution. We have completely lost control and we are powerless. That is very key to understanding any addiction, whether it's sex, alcohol, or drugs. When you feel that your behavior has become unmanageable and out of control, it's a great time to take a look to see if perhaps you have this addiction, because there is lots of types of therapy that specialize in each particular addiction. So I do hope that you all will come back. Whether you have addictions, or you suspect you have addictions, or you have friends, family members that may also have addiction issues, because we need loving support in our life, and we need to let go of shame, because where shame exists, the addiction persists. So please come back often. Come back again and again and again. Like this video, subscribe, make comments, ask questions. The questions are what are going to drive this channel. What you want to know about is what I want to talk about. And I look forward to seeing you at the next Sober Sex Sofa.